I'm a Tolkien nerd, I guess. Greetings, my name is Nina, welcome back to my channel. So in 2023 I made a video about my Tolkien collection. In 2026 I decided to make an update. Let's get started. And yeah, let me show you my updated Tolkien collection. I actually don't want to start with books, but with puzzles, because I have two. I have a yearly tradition. Around the New Year's Eve, I do puzzles. So here I have the puzzle Heroes of Middle-earth and Mount Doom. And I really like these puzzles. However, unfortunately, one piece of this puzzle was lost. And this is very sad. Let me put these away. The rest of are all books. So the first book that I grabbed is Unfinished Tales of Numenor and Middle-earth. So this is the first Tolkien book that I bought in English. And this pocket edition, and I actually want to replace it. I still haven't replaced it, and this is why I have it. Another book that I want to replace is the Letters of Tolkien. So this is a collection of his letters. I know that in 2023 an updated version came out. Actually, no, that's not an updated version. It's original full version, since the version that came out around 1980, this one, it did not contain all letters, and yeah, the updating this edition makes sense. And also in general, I really don't like this edition because it feels very cheap. The next book that I grabbed is The Silmarillion. So yeah, this is the only edition of The Silmarillion that I have. I do not have this book in English, and I do not have a new version of the book, and I do not have a new version, a more beautiful edition. And I really want to show you one thing, what I'm using as a bookmark in this book. I used the bus ticket. There's barely any text, but for some reason I keep it here, near the Beren and Luthien chapter. And yeah, this is a very difficult book to read, and I'm scared of reading it in English. However, I do want the English version. I read this book twice. Then I have my original edition of the trilogy, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and the first one is different because I bought this on my own, and these two were delivered to me. I asked a relative of mine to bring me these two books, and this is what she got. These two books, they have one translation, and this book has another. Yeah, these books are old. I bought this one in 2010. I received these two in 2013. Oh, wait a minute, there is one book that I forgot to take off the shelves. Because it's very small and it's on the top of my shelves, I completely forgot to add this one, but luckily I remembered. The Smith of Wootton Major. I read it only once and I haven't reread it since. And this one also contains the essay on fairy stories. So this very small edition contains the stories Smith of Wootton Major, Farmer Giles of Ham, The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, and Live by Nigel. And now comes the oldest book in this collection. I have had it since the 2000s. And in general, this is the very first Middle-earth book published, and obviously I'm talking about The Hobbit. I was so happy when I found this at home. I didn't know I had it. And I do find it very surprising that this edition has Gimli and Merry on the cover when they're not in the book. This is The Hobbit, not Lord of the Rings. When was this book published? In 2001. This was published around the time the first film came out. One of the reasons I do not rush to buy a prettier Russian edition is the translation. In this translation, Bilbo is still Baggins, not Thorbins or Sunkins or whatever. Yeah, they have multiple translations for Baggins in Russian. And finally, the last book in this video, which is in Russian. I did not intend to buy this. However, when I found it in the store, I knew I had to have it. So yeah, this one full volume edition of Lord of the Rings, which has the same translation as this edition. It's just so pretty. It looks very nice. And I finished reading it last November. So I read the first two books here. I read this book, but the third one I read on the Kindle. And I flew to Istanbul in November and I finished it right before my plane took off back here in Tbilisi. And yeah, that's all the books in Russian. So let me put these away. So the first one I'm gonna show you is The Hobbit, which I found in a store in Rome in 2024. Originally I did not buy it, but then I realized that I had to buy it, so I went back to the bookstore and got it. It's a very nice edition, and I did read it in August 2024. And obviously here I have the English version of Lord of the Rings, of course, and it took 2 years for me to read these. Yes, I have been reading these for 2 years, from 2021 to 2023. Yeah, 2 years. Yeah, it wasn't easy for me to read it in English. Particularly, it wasn't easy for me to read the third one for some reason. The first two felt easier to read. But still, I read The Lord of the Rings in English even though it was very difficult, and it took 2 years. And here I have on favorite stories, his essay and the commentary about the essay. So I didn't finish this book, so I didn't know the essay was there, and I only checked out after I bought this one. But hey, at least I have the essay in both English and Russian, and the edition is very beautiful, and in general I like to collect Tolkien stuff. Now this has to be the only book in this video that isn't written by Tolkien. However, it is about Tolkien, it's his biography. Tolkien and the Middle-earth, The Threshold of Middle-earth by John Garth. So this is about Tolkien, his biography, the war, and how it affected his writing. And I only read 18 pages so far. I started reading it this year. And the next over here I have the 3 separate stories from the Silmarillion. So I have Beren and Luthien, which I decided to reread this year, and I read around 80 pages so far. Then I have The Children of Húrin, which is very dark and gloomy, and The Fall of Gondolin, which isn't my favorite here. Yeah, 3 separate stories from the Silmarillion. The next one over here is the story of Kullervo. So this is what I call OG, Children of Húrin. aka this is the story which influenced the Children of Húrin. It's written here that Kullervo was the ancestor of Túrin Turambar, the tragic incestuous hero of the Children of Húrin. And finally, last and not least, I recently got this, My Pride and Joy, the hardcover editions of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, with illustrations by Alan Lee. These ones are also illustrated by Alan Lee. I was watching the book Leo, and she had this edition of Lord of the Rings, and once I saw it I was like, I need it. So yeah, this is how it looks. In process, and I remember that I forgot to include The Fall of Arthur. This is Tolkien's interpretation of the Arthurian legends. And also an honorable mention, while this isn't directly Tolkien, but I just want to include this amazing album anyway, Imaginations from the Other Side by Blind Guardian. because it has songs about Tolkien. Frodo is mentioned in the first song, Imaginations from the Other Side. As far as I remember, there is a Tolkien reference in every album of theirs until Nightfall in Middle-earth. I think that was the last album that referenced Tolkien, and they didn't refer to Tolkien ever since. But yeah, still an amazing album, and I wanted to include it. Anyway, that's all. This is my Tolkien collection in 2026. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time. Goodbye.